One night, a mother took her sons to celebrate at a high-end restaurant. The manager humiliated them. What he didn't know, he just gave her a reason to come back stronger. The sound of polished shoes against marble floors. The soft clink of crystal glasses. Laughter rising and falling in the air like a melody. Tanya Williams steps inside the La Meridian, one of Dallas's finest restaurants, with her two sons Malik and Jaden dressed in their best. Tonight is special. It's a night to celebrate a big milestone in her career. She wants her boys to see that they belong in places like this, in rooms where deals are made and success is rewarded. But the moment they enter, she feels it. The air shifts. It's subtle but unmistakable. Conversations pause only for a second. Eyes flicker in their direction. A woman at the corner table sips her wine, a little slower. A waiter glances at them, then at the maitre d'. As if waiting for a qui, Tanya squares her shoulders. She's used to this. She's had to fight for everything she has, and she refuses to let a few sideways glances ruin this moment. She smiles at Malik and Jaden. See fancy, right? Jaden, the younger one, grins. Malik, a little older, a little wiser, just watches. They approach the maitre d'. A tall, thin man with slick-back hair and a polished manner. He doesn't smile. Instead, he furrows his brow, flipping through the reservation book as if searching for something that isn't there. Williams' party of three, Tanya says, keeping her voice light. The maitre takes a beat too long to respond, then with a sigh, that shouldn't be necessary. He says, I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see your name here. Tanya doesn't flinch. She knows what this is. She pulls out her phone, scrolling quickly to the confirmation email. I made this reservation a week ago. Here it is, 7:30 p.m. Table for three. The matron glances at her phone, expression unchanged. There must have been a mix-up. Unfortunately, we're fully booked tonight. Silence. Tanya hears it before she sees it, the low whisper from a table nearby. The way the couple sitting to their right pretends to be absorbed in their menus. She tightens her grip on her purse. A mix-up, she repeats, her voice is calm but firm. I have a confirmation. My table should be available. The maitre doesn't budge. I'm afraid there's nothing I can do. Tanya doesn't move. She knows she could push harder. She knows she could demand a manager. But she also knows how this always plays out. And then, as if on cue, the manager arrives, a middle-aged man with sharp features and an air of importance. He stops next to the maitre d' and offers Tanya a rehearsed smile, the kind of smile that says, I'd rather not be dealing with this, ma'am. I apologize for the inconvenience, he says, but as my colleague mentioned, we're fully booked tonight. Tanya holds his gaze. I booked in advance. I have proof. He doesn't even look at her phone again. I apologize, but we can't accommodate you this evening. Malik shifts uncomfortably beside her. Jaden's eyes dart between his mother and the manager. His young mind trying to process what's happening. Tanya inhales slowly. She's faced rejection before she's had doors closed in her face more times than she can count. But this is different. This isn't just about her. It's about them, her boys, standing here watching this unfold, learning in real time what the world thinks of them. The humiliation settles in her stomach like a heavy stone. She exhales and nods, once not in agreement. Not in acceptance, just acknowledgement. Then she turns to Malik and Jaden lets him go. Jaden tugs at her sleeve. But Mom, I'm hungry. I know, baby. She says softly, Weck, go somewhere else. And just like that, she turns and walks out. She doesn't argue. She doesn't beg. She doesn't make a scene because she knows the real fight isn't here. It's out there, outside. She grips her keys tightly as she helps her sons into the car. Her hands tremble just a little as she buckles her seatbelt from the back seat. Malik's voice comes quietly. They didn't want us there. Tanya stares ahead. The streetlights blur into streaks against the windshield. No, she finally says they didn't. A beat of silence. Then Jaden, still young enough to hope, asks, will we go back one day? Tanya presses the ignition. The engine hums to life. She doesn't answer right away. Instead, she looks at them in the rearview mirror. Two boys who deserve to walk into any room with confidence. Who deserve to know that no one can decide where they do and don't belong. Then, finally, she speaks one day, she says, but not as customers. But what Tanya didn't know was that night would light a fire in her, one that would change everything. Tanya didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of what happened at that restaurant. Not just the way the manager dismissed her, not just the matred fake concern, not even the whispers from the other diners who watched, but said nothing. No, what haunted her was the look in Malik's eyes, the understanding he was only 12, but he had recognized it the moment the lesson, the unspoken rule that places like that weren't meant for people like them. And Jaden only 8, still too young to fully grasp what had happened, but old enough to feel it, to feel the sting. Tanya clenched her jaw. She had worked too hard for this, spent years building something from nothing. Late nights, early mornings, sacrifices. She refused to let a single night define her. But what if it had defined them? What if, without realizing it, her sons had learned that lesson too well? She pushed herself up in bed, swung her legs over the side, and reached for her laptop. If they weren't going to give her a seat at the table, she would build her own. Tanya had always been a fighter, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs just to put food on the table. She knew hustle before she knew anything else, and now she poured all of that fire into her catering business. Every rejection became motivation. Every roadblock became an opportunity. Every no fueled her next move. She worked harder than ever. Her morning started at 4:30 a.m. Testing recipes, managing orders, making deliveries. Before the city even woke up, by midday, she was balancing invoices, hiring staff, taking meetings, scaling the business, one strategic move at a time. At night, when her boys were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table with a notebook full of ideas, mapping out the next steps. She wasn't just building a catering company. She was building a brand, and people started to notice her flavors were unmatched. Word spread. One event turned into 10, 10 into 50. Soon her business was servicing corporate events, weddings, private dinners for high-profile clients. She went from renting a small commercial kitchen to owning her own space, from struggling to pay vendors to being the one who created jobs, from knocking on doors to having her phone ringing nonstop. Success wasn't just an idea anymore. It was real. But even after all the wins, the press features, the record-breaking profits, she never forgot that night. Never forgot the way Malik looked at her in the car, the quiet anger in his voice. They didn't want us there. That moment had buried itself in her bones one afternoon. Nearly 7 years later, Tanya sat across from one of her business partners discussing potential investments over lunch. He scrolled through his phone, rattling off numbers, restaurant closures, and opportunities in the market. Then casually he said something that made her pause. "You know, La Meridian, that place is going under." Tanya's fork stopped midair. He kept talking, unaware that she had completely left the conversation. The restaurant, that restaurant, the place, struggling, failing, dying, a slow, measured breath left her lips. "That's interesting," she said, keeping her voice even while her business partner shrugged. "Bad management, declining sales, poor customer service. It's been on the market for a few months now. No one wants to touch it." Tanya looked down at her plate. She had spent years burying that night, using it as fuel to build her empire, to make sure her sons would never feel like outsiders in their own success. And now the universe had placed this in front of her. She had a choice. She could let it go, keep moving, act like it didn't matter anymore, or she could buy it. But Tanya wasn't sure if reopening that door would bring closure or a flood of emotions. She wasn't ready for. Tanya sat in her office staring at the real estate listing on her screen. La Meridian for sale. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her nails against the desk. This wasn't just business. It was personal. Buying a restaurant was a big move, even for her. She had built a thriving catering empire, but running a full-scale luxury dining establishment was an entirely different game. Her logical side told her to walk away. It's just a restaurant, let it fail, let it rot, move on. But something deeper, something more visceral wouldn't let her. She glanced over at a framed picture on her desk. Malik and Jaden, taken years ago. They were just boys when they stood outside that restaurant, confused, hurt, dismissed. Now Malik was 19, finishing his first year in college. Jaden was 15 already talking about entrepreneurship like his mother. They had grown evolved, and so had she. Tanya reached for her phone and dialed her lawyer.
"Hey, Scott," she said, voice steady, "find out what it's going to take to buy La Meridian."
2 weeks later, she walked through the doors of the same restaurant that had once thrown her out. But this time, she wasn't asking or a table. She was here to take ownership. The place looked the same: polished floors, crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths. But it felt empty. There were customers, but not many. The energy was off. A waiter rushed over, mistaking her for a guest. "Good evening, do you have a—" "I'm here to meet the owner," Tanya said. The man blinked, nodded, then hurried toward the back. A few minutes later, a short, stocky man in his mid-50s emerged from the kitchen. Ed Russo, the longtime owner, the man who had built this place from the ground up, only to watch it crumble under his leadership. "Tanya Williams," she said, extending her hand. He gave her a once-over, clearly trying to place her. "You're the buyer?" he asked, shaking her hand. His grip was weak. "I am," Ed sighed, running a hand over his face. "Look, I'll be straight with you. Business is bad. The brand is varnished. Customers aren't coming like they used to. You sure you want to take this off my hands?" Tanya tilted her head. "If I weren't T, I wouldn't be here." He let out a dry chuckle. "Fair enough." They sat down at one of the empty tables. Ed talked numbers, liabilities, overhead costs. He sounded tired, defeated, like he knew this was a sinking ship, and he was lucky to be getting off in time. Tanya listened, absorbing every detail. Then, after an hour of negotiations, she slid a folder across the table. "My lawyers have already reviewed the terms," she said. "You're getting a fair deal." Ed picked up the paperwork, skimming the pages, his lips pressed into a thin line. "This place used to be something special," he murmured. Tanya raised an eyebrow. "And what happened?" Ed let out a bit of laugh. "Management got too comfortable. The culture changed somewhere along the way. We lost sight of what mattered." He shook his head. "By the time I realized it was too late." Tanya said nothing, because she knew exactly when this place lost its way, when it decided who belonged and who didn't, when it turned away the wrong person, when it turned away. Her Ed sighed, flipping to the last page. "All right, do it." He reached for the pen. Tanya watched as he signed away the restaurant. In that moment, she didn't feel victory. She didn't feel revenge. She felt something bigger. Control, power, the ability to rewrite the ending. Ed stood up, shaking her hand one last time. "Good luck, Miss Williams. You're going to need it." Tanya smiled for the first time that day. I don't believe in luck," she said. "I believe in change." But buying the restaurant was just the beginning. Now Tanya had to rebuild it from the inside out. Tanya stepped inside her restaurant, because that's what it was, now hers. The air felt different this time, not because the space had changed, but because she had. She walked through the dining area, her heels clicking against the marble floors. The chandeliers still sparkled. The linen tablecloths were still pristine. But underneath all that elegance, she saw the cracks, the empty tables, the tired stuff, the ghost of what this place used to be. She wasn't here to revive the old La Meridian. She was here to rebuild it, and the first step, cleaning house. The next morning, she called a full staff meeting. She stood at the front of the restaurant, her presence commanding the room. The employees, chefs, waiters, bartenders, hosts gathered in small clusters, whispering. They all knew who she was. The new owner. The woman who had just bought their failing restaurant. Some of them were nervous. Others were skeptical. A few stood with a RMS crossed, waiting to see what she had to say. Tanya took her time, letting the silence settle before she spoke. "I won't waste your time," she began. "La Meridian has a reputation, one that isn't serving it well." A few of the employees exchanged glances. "It's not just about bad sales, it's about bad culture." More silence. "I don't run businesses that make people feel like they don't belong. That stops today." A voice was steady, unapologetic. Some of them shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded. "Some of you were a part of the problem. Some of you weren't. Either way, things are changing. New policies, new management, a new vision. If you're not on board, this is your moment to leave." She let her words hang in the air. A long, tense pause, then slowly 2 people stepped forward, the matron and an older server. They didn't even bother making eye contact as they pulled off their aprons and walked out the door. Tan didn't stop them. She turned back to the rest of the staff. Anyone else? No one moved. She nodded. Good, let Tan get to work. The next 2 months were a complete transformation. She renovated the space, updating the design, while keeping the essence of what made it high-end. She rebranded the name, no longer La Meridian, but Williams & Kodu. It wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a statement. She retrained the staff, hiring new people, promoting those who deserved it, and making it clear that exclusivity had nothing to do with discrimination. The menu got an upgrade. The atmosphere changed. The people who once avoided the restaurant, they started paying attention again. She knew the grand reopening had to be perfect. It had to send a message, not just to the city, but to her sons, because this wasn't just about a business. This was about proving that no one gets to decide where they belong. Opening night arrived, and the energy was electric. Guests flooded in. Drawn by the buzz, the media showed up, eager to see what the new owner of the former LA Meridian had done with the place. The restaurant was packed. Tanya stood near the entrance, watching it all, taking it in. Then out of the corner of her eye, she saw a familiar face, the former manager. He wasn't dressed for dinner. He wasn't here to celebrate. He stood just inside the door, looking around, confused. He hadn't recognized her yet. Tanya stepped forward, looking for a table. She asked. The man turned to her, brow furrowed. Then slowly, realization dawned. His mouth parted slightly, but no words came out. Tanya held his gaze. I can check the reservation list, but I don't see your name. The man swallowed. He looked at the crowd at the restaurant, thriving under new ownership. His expression was unreadable, embarrassment, maybe regret. Tanya let the moment stretch, then finally she spoke again. Enjoy your evening. And with that she turned away. But the night wasn't just about proving a point, it was about proving a lesson, and Tanya wasn't done yet. The night was a success. Every table was full, every plate was flawless. The buzz around Williams & Co. was undeniable. Tanya stood near the bar, watching her vision come to life. Her staff moved with purpose. Her guests laughed over fine wine and perfectly plated meals. This was what the restaurant should have always been. Then from across the room, her eyes met Malik. Now 19, her eldest son stood beside his brother Jaden, who had grown into a sharp, confident 15-year-old. They had seen everything that night. The full circle moment, the shift in power, or the lesson that had been years in the making. Malik smirked. You really did it. Tanya exhaled. I told you we'd come back. Jaden glanced toward the entrance where the former manager had been standing just moments ago. So that was him. Tanya nodded. That was him. Malik scoffed. I would have kicked him out. She looked at him carefully. He meant it. But Tanya wasn't here to be petty. That's not power. She said power isn't revenge. It's being so successful that they have to watch you win. Jaden's face lit up with understanding. Malik's expression softened. This was the lesson that night years ago. The world had tried to teach them that they didn't belong tonight. Tanya rewrote that letter, not by fighting for scraps, but by owning the table. She reached for her glass and raised it to never letting anyone tell you where you don't belong. Malik and Jaden lifted their glasses to writing our own story. They clinked glasses and Tanya smiled. This wasn't just about a restaurant. It was about breaking cycles, about making sure the next generation never had to ask permission to exist in the spaces they deserved to be in. And as the night carried on, as laughter and joy filled every inch of the restaurant she now owned, Tanya knew one thing for certain: she had already won. Tanya's story isn't just about a restaurant. It's about turning obstacles into opportunities, about refusing to let rejection define you. Sometimes the best response to being excluded isn't fighting for acceptance. It's building something so strong that they have to acknowledge. So the next time someone tells you you don't belong, ask yourself, do I need their approval or do I need to build my own table? Because real power isn't in being let in. It's making sure the door is never closed again.